Call Lembit 0800 756 1111 or text Kent to 81333. Lembit Opik.
BBC Radio Kent.
Okay, before we go to your first subject, you do children's books, and it was World Book Day recently.
Yeah, indeed.
You wrote a book about turning your life around, therapies.
That's very different. That was published by a different company, because obviously I'm sort of known for children's books. World Book Day, we had one of the authors talking to about 400 children up in Glasgow. We do little books about conservation and heritage. And actually, it's just dovetailed nicely into the climate change thing, because we've been talking about this for years. And these sort of children's stories are designed to be fun, uplifting way of actually getting the themes of conservation and tiger conservation in particular to school children. So it always gets well received. But my own book is really about a midlife crisis and turning to therapies for a way through it. And the audiobook's just out, so I've been kind of busy doing that recently. And that was a new experience for me.
And what's the narrative? What's the key message from your life experience and from your book?
I think actually it's really interesting because of the subjects that we're talking about. You were saying that your mother came down here for her husband. And I think the key thing for me was actually going through all of these different therapies and having a bit of a burnout breakdown moment, is that I realised that a lot of my thinking was very set early on in my childhood, because I was brought up in a sort of Scottish Presbyterian culture. And actually, I'd carried those right through, hard working, overdoing things, right into this point. But the therapies and the things that I did and the people that I met, new people, actually made me revisit a lot of those things and realise that I could change some of those deep-seated attitudes that I had just accepted. And I think a lot of them were to do with women's place. So for me, all of these subjects we're talking about today, they're very relevant, and I really think it's good that we've moved on. And
we'll talk about Women's Day as well a little bit later on. Fascinating stuff. I'm very interested to talk more about the therapy side as well. What's your first story? And then we'll come back to Women's Day.
I just wanted to do, sorry, it's a coronavirus one, but I could do a Boris Johnson one if you prefer.
No, you're the boss here. You're the boss.
I really thought it was kind of interesting, because over the last couple of days we've seen the royals doing very different pictures in the press and on TV. So the Duchess of Sussex, she goes into school surrounded by kids at close proximity, kissing and hugging them, and the day before we see the Queen with her gloves on, actually with, I think it was Wendy Craig, she was giving her OBE or whatever it was to. And I just sort of think, to me, the problem with coronavirus is that at the moment there's so much confusion around. We can't all have the solution for what we are doing right now. Yes, okay, washing your hands, great. We all know that. We're probably kind of fed up with it now. But we really need to start thinking, right, how much do we have to worry? Because we're getting confusing messages and mixed messages from different places.
On 104.2 FM in Dungeness, Herne Bay and Folkestone.
And across West Kent on 96.7 FM. This is BBC Radio Kent.
What's your second story, Kay?
Well, it's actually, obviously the watchdog is probing Boris Johnson for his holiday expenses and how it came about, because there seems to be some confusing stories about who actually paid, who set it up, and where the money actually came from. And there's obviously very strict guidelines that should be followed. And I think that it's kind of funny, because I'm sure Boris Johnson isn't that bothered about this, because he's got so many other things on his plate. But they do seem to dog him. The thing with Jennifer Arcuri, that has still to be investigated. But there are
Remind us of that story.
So basically, Jennifer Arcuri, who was in the tech side of sort of tech London business, managed to get herself onto some international trade missions. And there seemed to be some suggestion and obviously we don't know the truth of this, but there have been TV programmes about it and all the rest of it, that actually it was due to her close connection with Boris Johnson. And there are obviously, films of them interacting at some of these events. And I think it's just really interesting that there's always, you see one story, but there are all these backstories which kind of undermine or don't undermine what's going on. At the end of the day, I'm sure everyone wants Boris Johnson to just do us a really, really good job. But there are these things which suggest that he's less than fastidious about how he runs, politics. And certainly before he became Prime Minister, just a bit kind of, you kind of imagine it, because he's quite relaxed, he's very natural, and he probably doesn't, dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And from my point of view, I sort of think, well, is he going to be found out? My gut feel is that it's not going to make any difference, because people either love Boris or don't, and they'll just accept anything he does.
Call Lembit 0800 756 1111 or text Kent to 81333. Lembit Opik.
BBC Radio Kent.
Let's get back to your story, Kay.
So, heartbreaking story really about the Sheikh's daughter in Dubai. Basically, the daughter called the UK police for help 17 years after her kidnap and mistreatment. And
17 years.
Yeah. And basically, there basically calls for an investigation into Cambridgeshire Force, because apparently they knew all about this but decided not to take it forward. And I don't know if anyone's seen in the news, but one of the other daughters, actually Princess Latifa, has disappeared, and there are grave concerns as to what has actually happened to her. But there was a history of beating and maltreatment, torture, and she eventually tried to escape the UAE again, but her father, the allegation is that the father facilitated this and brought her back to Dubai, and there are concerns for her future. But I think it's just that it brings it back here because the Cambridgeshire Force had a chance to actually do something about it and didn't.
Do you know this story?
I do know this story very well, yeah. Princess Latifa was on a boat, wasn't she? This was the second time she'd escaped. The first time she escaped, she was kidnapped and taken back to Dubai. And I think about 18 years later, she managed to escape again on this boat.
So she was there for 17 or 18 years?
Yeah, and she wasn't seen in public ever. And her other sister has not been seen for 2 decades.
Her other sister wasn't seen, but she began to have a bit of a normal life. She was doing things like skydiving, but she said, the kind of outward look of Dubai and all this, wonderful housing, and on the surface, superficially, it looks fantastic. But she said the oppression underneath it is extreme, and women are treated so badly. They are. What she said on her video letter before she disappeared was that women are really just the property of their fathers or their husbands, and basically they can do anything to them without any fear of retribution. And she said, if you see this video, there's probably something awful's happened to me, because she's literally disappeared off the face of the earth. Nobody can find her. Everyone's saying, oh no, she's fine, she's in Dubai, but there's no pictures of her. She's literally disappeared. And the first time she was abducted, she was tortured and kept in a darkened room for days and days at a time, beaten by these people, and she didn't even know what time of day it was. Her sister was drugged. There's all kinds of horrendous things.
Her sister was drugged.
Yes.
And bundled into a car by armed guards.
Indeed.
And then kidnapped and taken back to Dubai.
So Latifa, Princess Latifa, was taken off this yacht, abducted by commandos. And the big story is that she thought, because she was already in Indian waters, that she was safe. She tried to claim asylum. That was the plan. And in fact, what happened was there was seemingly collusion between the UAE and India because of strategic, power that was required, and she was taken back.
Why?
Because they didn't want her to escape. She has a wonderful life here.
He has 25 children by 6 wives, and he likes to control every single one of them. And the reason this has come up again in court is because his wife has left him with 2 younger children, and she's trying to get help for asylum and trying to actually not be kidnapped with her children and taken back to Dubai, which is what she believes will happen if she doesn't get the protection of the British authorities.
Yeah.
So that has come up in court, and the court found that the stories of the kidnapping were, they believed, true.
And this video, how did this come out? The one which goes, if you've seen this, something bad's happened to me.
Yes, it was actually a documentary, a BBC documentary the other day. But she had made this film because she said, if you're seeing this, I will make it because I'm not sure what my future is going to be. If you see it, it means something probably bad has happened to me. And she gave it out to various people, friends, trusted people, before she made her escape attempt from Dubai. It just sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? It's Dubai. People go there for holidays, but there's all this underneath the surface.
On 104.2 FM in Dungeness, Herne Bay and Folkestone.
And across West Kent on 96.7 FM. This is BBC Radio Kent.
International Women's Day. We've talked about it on and off on the show so far, Kay. What are we celebrating? What are we recognising by having a day for women? Or is it just another money-making scheme for those who think that we should be buying gifts?
I think it's wonderful because every year you realise that we're making some strides forward in equality and actually looking at, highlighting issues around women around the globe. But actually, it also makes us realise that we've still got a long way to go. I do actually think that there's an India Night piece all about International Women's Day in the Sunday Times. Really, really good piece, which is saying exactly that. It's a time to stop when all the rest of the madness is going on around us, to actually stop and focus on where we are and look at all the things that have happened that are helpful, and actually see a big list of all the other things that we have to do. And actually that means working with men to make that happen.